What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on Dad's Silverado once again, and we're going to be installing a dual catch can setup. This is going to be a very budget style system. We got both of these cans off of Amazon. They are baffled, so I think they're going to do the job perfectly fine on this naturally aspirated 6-liter. Now, I want to thank you guys once again because you have been absolutely killing it lately. Between the comments, the likes, and subscribing, I really do appreciate it more than anything. So once again, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and I really appreciate all of your support. Now, if you guys haven't been following along, this is my dad's 2012 Silverado 1500 that originally came with a flex fuel 5.3 liter that had DOD and AFM. Now, this whole thing started because it ate a lifter, and we wanted to take this thing apart, put a Truck Norris cam in it, some new valve springs, and some new lifters. But once we got in there, we realized that the 5.3 that was in here was completely thrashed. So we took that motor out and started the hunt for a new engine. And I was able to track down an LY6 6-liter, which means that it has 823 rec port heads up at Next Gen Parts Place. Once we got our new LY6 home, we tore that thing down and started installing our new BTR Truck Norris cam, as well as the BTR lifters and valve springs, and a whole bunch of other little goodies like some Speed Engineering long tube headers. We were able to get this thing fired up at the end of our last video for its first start, and this thing sounds amazing. It's going to chop like crazy, and it's going to turn out to be a perfect daily driver for my dad. Now, today we're just going to be getting our catch cans installed so that we can keep all of our hard work nice and clean. So let's get through the intro and check these things out. Now that we've gotten through the intro, we can take a look at one of our new catch cans. Now, like I mentioned before, we are going to be running 2 of these on this truck. We're just going to open up one because they are the identical same thing. Now, if you guys are boosted, I would recommend looking at one of our previous videos where we ran a dual 10AN port vented catch can on our ProCharge GTO. But for this truck being NA and staying NA for the foreseeable future, I think 2 of these is going to be perfectly fine. So let's go ahead and open one of these up and take a look at it. All right, let's open one of these up. So it comes with a little breather filter. We'll set that to the side. I'll show you guys what it looks like. We're not going to be using it. If you're going to go vented, I'd recommend a different can. But for what we're doing, this one's going to be perfect. Comes with a nice little filter. Set that one off to the side. Comes with some fittings and looks like plugs and stuff. This looks to be a bracket of some sort, a mounting bracket. We'll probably end up using that. Some screws. Some cheap little hose clamps. A little valve. Not sure if we'll use this valve or if we'll get a different one. You got to remember the price of this can. We're mainly buying it for the can itself. And we'll go ahead and open that up. It actually has a pretty decent little finish on it. We'll throw the box out of our way. We'll go ahead and try to open this thing up. All right, so it's got an open can. We can go ahead and throw some steel wool in here if we want, if we're worried about the baffle not being enough. That'll help trap all of the oil in the can. But it does have this little baffle on it, and then it also has this right here. Not sure if you guys can see it too well. Does this? Oh, that'll turn. So this right here is also a help for keeping oil in the can, not getting it back into the system. Looks like this top port would be for your filter, but we're going to cap that one, and then we'll just use this port back to the intake, which goes to this, and then we'll use this port coming into the can, which just dumps right here. So as you can see, it comes in here. Any oil will hit this little ledge, hopefully, and collect. Then you've also got this baffle here to help it for whatever that missed. And then on the way back out, you've also got this to catch any last stuff. So it's actually like triple baffled technically, and we're gonna stuff some steel wool in there. Obviously this isn't any $400 or $500 catch can, but for the money, this is gonna work out perfectly fine for most of your average daily driver style builds. So we'll go ahead and check out what it came with for fittings and see what we've got there. So we've got this little ball valve, came with a whole bunch of different barb fittings. That one looks to be the same as that. So I'm assuming these are for different lines going in and out of the can. And then I would have to assume that this one is for the air filter or the breather filter if you chose to use it. And then it does have an Allen head style plug and then a regular hex head style plug. We'll throw this stuff back in the bag so we don't lose it. And then I will show you guys how we plan on mounting and running the lines for this thing. So let's go over the plan real quick. So as you guys can see, there is a factory PCV system on here. We do have a cheap aftermarket intake on here, but it's a very similar system to as it would be factory. So you've got a port that comes off of the passenger side valve cover that would go to your intake, which we have right here. And then on the other side, a lot of people don't notice this one unless they dive in deeper to these trucks, but there's actually one that goes right here to the top of that intake manifold. It goes right here. It's a special weird little fitting that like turns to lock in. I'll show you guys when we take that off, but it locks in right there to the top of the manifold and then goes back to the back of the driver's side valve cover and clips into the top to a port right there. So that's the factory system, but I think what we're gonna do, instead of running a vacuum line from the intake, I think we're gonna cap the intake off altogether. We'll use this vacuum port here and split it off to our two separate cans and then run a line from that breather and this breather up here on this valve cover, run both valve covers over and across to our catch cans. Now, as far as catch can mounting goes, what we're gonna do is we're gonna utilize this support rod right here that they have from the factory, and we're gonna take two catch cans and mount them something like that. Now, we might go ahead and weld a bracket onto here and then mount them both, one here and one over here. But if you guys don't have the ability to use a welder, you can get some clamp-on units that will clamp on and give you something to mount to. Or what I was gonna do originally, just so that anybody could do it, is you could use some small bolts to mount these things through those mounting holes and use very small ones so that you could drill through the center of this rod and bolt it directly to the rod, which with the weight of these things being aluminum, I think would be just fine. But since we have the ability to weld, we're gonna go ahead and weld a piece of flat stock right on the back of that, and then we can mount both cans, and the top piece here gives us the ability to clock these things any way that we need to. So first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get this thing off. Once we get that off, we can go ahead and start making our piece for it, get it welded up, get the cans in place, and start getting these things mounted, and then we can start plumbing this thing all in. We've got both catch cans mocked up. I'm gonna go ahead and tack them in place, make sure they're where we want them, and then we can pop it off and finish weld it. All right, let's go ahead and weld this thing up. As you guys can see, we got this thing all welded up. This side came out really nice. The welds actually look really good. This side, well, this side's the reason I own a grinder. So we're gonna go ahead, mock everything up on the truck. We can start plumbing it, and eventually we'll spray this thing gloss black. Now that we're finally ready to start plumbing our new catch cans, the first thing that I'm gonna do is pop off the line that goes from our passenger side valve cover to our intake pipe. Then we're gonna take a little plug of some sort, cap or plug, and we're just gonna plug that off. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a hose clamp on it, but a tight enough plug is gonna be fine because this isn't boosted. I'll go ahead and tighten this hose clamp down. Now I'm gonna take off the line that's at the passenger valve cover. We can throw this one to the side. We can put a new piece of our line on here. We ended up going with 3/8 fuel line. Now on most of my other projects, I always run AN lines and AN fittings, and we do a like nice race style setup. But for what this thing's gonna be, daily driver, I think doing it this way is gonna be perfectly fine. It's not a show truck. It's still gonna look perfectly fine, but we're not gonna have any of that oil smell in the truck because we're using a recirculated can. So we're gonna loop it something like that once we get a hose clamp on there, and then we'll run it up with these heater hoses up along the firewall where it'll tie into some other lines we're gonna run across, and then over to our catch can. I decided to run our line out on a big swooping turn, and we're gonna go over to this heater line, and we'll go ahead and get some zip ties on it. We'll use our little zip tie gun. If you guys don't have one of these, definitely recommend them. Super cheap. I got this one on Amazon. I'll put it in the affiliate link below. Thing works so good. It's so handy to have, especially in a tight spot where you can't always get in there to pull it tight. It'll just pull it tight and then cuts it off. It has different settings for the strength of how tight you want the zip tie, but I use it all the time. So now that we got this one zip tied off, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the head of the zip tie down bottom so you don't see it. We'll get the rest of them zipped off and then start working it across to the catch can. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is pop off this factory plastic hard line that goes from the top of the manifold to the back of the driver's valve cover. We'll get this popped off and we're gonna modify it and try to use it for our new system. It's just got like a little spring-loaded plastic clip on the valve cover side that you can kind of pull up and out of the way. And then that'll just pop right off. And then we can swing it over. And on the manifold side, it's just got like a little spot where it kind of clips in. So we can turn it past it. Oh, we got it. You just turn it clockwise and it'll pop out of its little keeper. And we can just pull this out. Just like that. It looks like this. And we'll take it over to the bench and modify it so that we can use a couple pieces of it. That's gonna be our little adapter piece. We're gonna cut another piece off of this hard plastic line so that we can use this piece coming off of the valve cover, run it over to here, and then go to our hose here so that we can tuck it up out of the way and keep it looking nice and factory. Now we've got the two remaining pieces that we modified here. We've got the end that's gonna go to the manifold right here, and then this end is gonna go to the back of the driver's valve cover. And I'm gonna clip this down and turn it so that this is kind of up against the firewall. We'll put our new hose on this and run it to the catch can. And then same thing with this. We'll turn this wherever it fits good, put a hose on it, run it to the firewall, and over to the catch can. So let's go ahead and pop these in. For this, we're just gonna simply push it down on the valve cover and it'll clip in. Just like that. And then we're just gonna swing that over, kind of like so. Run a hose to it, up and over. Now we're gonna take another piece of our rubber fuel line and connect it to the hard plastic line that we modified on the driver's valve cover and run that to our catch can. The 3/8 rubber fuel line seems to fit over that just about perfect. We're gonna throw a hose clamp on it anyways, and then we'll run it over to the catch can. Now we can put some more of the 3/8 hose on the piece that we made for our intake manifold side. We'll get that on there, put a hose clamp on it, and we'll pop this back in the manifold. I am gonna loosely zip tie this line we just added to the fuel rail that's right next to it, the fuel rail crossover, just enough to hold it so that that fitting can't come loose and create a vacuum leak. Then we can run this line up and over just like we did all the rest. All right guys, so it is the next day, and last night before I called it quits, I decided to hit this with a quick coat of paint. As you guys can see, I sprayed it gloss black, hit it with some primer, and then just went ahead and painted it, and it came out pretty decent. There's a run or two in it, but it's gonna look perfectly fine in our engine bay. So we're finally ready to start final assembly. But that leads us to a little issue that we're having. So as you guys can see, I've got both cans laid out here, and I do have a 90 on this one, but I don't have a 90 that I'm happy with for this one. I ordered some a week or so ago, and they still haven't gotten delivered. Today is New Year's, but we did try running all over the place to try to find some at local hardware stores, and I just couldn't find any two that were the same. So the plan was to put a 90 in each can, have the hose come out then Y it together to a single line and have that come down with a little T valve somewhere behind the bumper where you don't see it, but that it's easy to get to, so that we could go ahead, put the valve on there, and all you'd have to do to drain both cans simultaneously would be to open that valve and you'd be good to go. But like I said, sadly it's New Year's, so none of the stores that we wanted to go to were open, and our package definitely isn't gonna arrive today. So what we're gonna do instead for the time being is, this kit did come with a couple little Allen head plugs in the kit right here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and plug off both of these holes for now, and we'll get everything installed. Now that we're ready for final assembly, we can go ahead and start getting these fittings sealed up. So we'll go ahead and use some thread tape, get it on each one of these fittings, and then start tightening them down. We'll just go ahead and snug that guy up like that on both of them, and these things are ready to get mounted to our bracket. So the hose that we just ran from the intake manifold, I have tucked up nice and neat with some zip ties with the other hoses. We're gonna add a T or a Y to this line so that we can use this as a vacuum port to both catch cans. So I'm gonna cut this right about here so that the T lands down in there where it'll be out of the way and you won't really see it. So I've got it marked. We're gonna go ahead and just cut this real quick there. Now ideally I'd like to be using a Y right here, because we could have one end here and then the two ends would come out like that. But of course I'm still waiting on that to get here as well. Ordered it at the same time and I couldn't find any local, so I'm gonna have to make do with a T, which down in there it'll be just fine. We'll make it work, but it would have been nice to have a nice clean Y to come off of this. So let's grab that. We'll get that on this hose. We'll tuck it down in there with the other two lines on it and get everything ran to the catch can. Let's go ahead, get one on here. Get one on right here. So like I said, sadly all we have is this T. We're gonna have to make it work. I would have much rather a Y, but it'll do the job and you'll never see it. So we'll get some hose clamps on these, feed it down in there, get the final line on right here, and then these two ends can go to the catch can. All right, so we've got this thing all set up. Once again, I'd much rather be using a Y, but this is gonna work just fine. So let's go ahead and get it tucked back in there. We'll run these two lines over to our catch can and start getting that all hooked up. I'm gonna go ahead and put one of our first lines on here. Grab our second line. So the ones on this side of the can are going to each valve cover. And then the other side is the baffled outlet side. So that side's gonna go to the T that we put in there, going to the intake manifold. Now that we've got both cans mounted and plumbed in, I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of our finished product. So we've got our line coming out of the passenger valve cover, loops around up to the firewall. We've got a line coming out of the top of our intake manifold, which serves as a vacuum source for both catch cans. And then we've got a line that comes out of the rear of the driver's side valve cover. All three of those lines meet up and run along the firewall together, where they get tucked down behind and below the hood latch assembly or the hood hinge assembly. And then we tee into the vacuum line so that it goes from one line. We have two lines coming out. So all four lines run along there behind the fuse box over to our catch cans. So both cans share a vacuum source, but they both have their own inlet from each valve cover. So I think this is gonna work out perfectly fine for us. Now there was a few different ways that you could go about mounting these things. You could use smaller hardware, drill right through the round bar that was already here and mount it that way. Or you could even use like a piece of angle iron, cut a piece off so you could bolt it here and bolt it over here, and that would work perfectly fine as well. There's many ways you could mount these things. This is just how we decided to do it. So I think this is gonna work out perfectly fine for us. My only complaint about these catch cans so far is that they should have a third bolt on this little slider assembly. There should be a bolt here and there should be a bolt here, as they only have 2 bolts each right now. So that's my only complaint, because this bracket is a little bit thin. It's easy to bend if you're not not careful with it. So just be careful when you're mounting it up. Once you get it mounted up, it's perfectly fine, and the hose actually helps support it too. Those things are not going anywhere. So I'm super happy with how this thing turned out. I think it's going to work out great for Dad's little daily driver. So there you have it, guys. We've got both of our new catch cans installed and plumbed in, and I actually think it came out really good. The location worked perfectly. They're tucked out of the way, and I think it looks pretty decent as well, and I know it's going to work perfectly fine for what we're doing. Now, like I said earlier in the video, if you guys are a boosted or higher horsepower application, you can go back and check out the video I did on my ProCharge GTO and how we ran that system. That one uses a vented catch can with all AN lines, and that one came out really nice as well. But for a lower horsepower NA daily driver type setup, I think this system's going to work perfectly fine for them, and I think it's going to do great. So as always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and check us out on all of our other social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.